This big thing is called double cross. Double Cross is a role-playing game set in the modern day about mutants with superpowers, shadow governments and organizations, and trying not to lose your mind. So it's kinda equal parts Vampire the Masquerade, Marvel's X-Men comic book series, and the Shin Megami Tensei games. Now, that's all a pretty big comparison to make, so let me back up just a little bit. In Double Cross, the setting of Double Cross that is, there's something known as the Renegade virus, and it's infected just about everybody in the world. It lies dormant in most people, but there's a few people that it's active in. And those that it is active in, they become mutants with amazing powers. The cost, though, is that they tend to be a little bit insane. Negative emotions like panic, fear, and anger come to them more easily, and they walk a slippery slope of completely losing their mind to the Renegade virus. And in Double Cross, you're playing as one of them. So let's just go ahead and get started on how to make a potential monster. There's 3 options for character creation in this game: Quick Start, Construction, and Full Scratch. Quick Start is just choosing one of the game's various pre-made characters and changing their personal data to make it your own character. Full Scratch is on the other end of the spectrum, where you're given a blank character and so much experience points and you buy every individual stat and power and skill that you want. Construction, however, is a happy middle ground of the two, where you make various broad choices about your character, and it leaves you with a well-balanced and fairly competent character. This is the method that we're going to cover today. The construction method starts with selecting a syndrome, which is basically how the Renegade virus manifests in your character. You can think of these as sort of the character classes in this game, since it's what has the biggest impact on what your character can do. You can choose up to 3 syndromes. How many, as well as which syndromes you choose, determines what your starting stats will be, as well as what powers you'll have available to you. Choosing one syndrome gives you a smaller selection of powers, but on the whole it gives you a lot more potential with those powers. After that, you choose what's referred to as your character's work and cover. Work is what your character does for a living and determines what your starting skills are. They also have a small influence on your starting stats. Cover, on the other hand, is what your character's role in society is, and it doesn't have a huge impact on gameplay. Your character's work and cover don't necessarily need to be the same thing. If your work is detective, and you choose mafia as your cover, that could just mean you're an undercover cop that's working in the mob. And they don't necessarily need to be at odds with each other either. If your character has part-timer as their work, and student as their cover, they're just a student with a part-time job maybe. After you've got all that chosen, you calculate your stats. There's a chart that you check to determine what your stats are based on your syndrome, and your work gives you 1 more point of another stat. After that, you get to distribute 3 more points anywhere else, so long as you have at least 1 in every stat when you're done. Then you get to select your powers. There's 4 that are chosen for you, but after that you get to choose 4 more, and you get 2 points to raise the level of some of those powers you've chosen. After you've decided your powers, you then move on to your skills. In addition to the skills you get from your work, you also get 5 points distributed into your skills. Skills are usually raised on a 1-for-1 basis, but skills like information and art are done on a 2-for-1 basis. The last major decision you make about your character is what their starting items are. And the way this game handles acquiring new equipment is probably my favorite out of any game I've ever played. Your character gains what's referred to as stock points at the start of each game session. The amount of stock points you get is equal to your social stat and your procure skill doubled. Each item costs a certain amount of stock points, and you spend that many stock points to more or less be guaranteed you'll always start each game with that item. Any stock points you don't use are added to your character's savings. Now, if your character ever finds themselves needing a particular item, they might be able to use their procure skill to get a hold of said item, and they can use some of their savings to get a bonus to that roll. And with all your character's possessions determined, all that's left is determining your character's personal data. This is mostly story-related stuff, like what it was like when they discovered their powers, what their home life is like, and somebody important in their life. With all that said, the next thing I want to talk about is dice rolls. This game uses 10-sided dice, and you're gonna need quite a few of them. Basically, anytime you make a roll, you roll a number of dice equal to the relevant stat, and you take the highest number from those dice and add the relevant skill. Criticals are also a thing in this game, and they work like this. If so much as one of those dice shows up as 10, you add 10 to the total and roll those 10s again. Then, should those roll 10, you add another 10 and roll again. This can pretty much go on indefinitely, but it's kind of unlikely. Just about every dice roll in this game uses some variation of this process. For example, firing a gun uses your senses to determine how many dice you roll, and you add your range skill to the result. The meat of this game and the rulebook is powers. Powers change how certain basic rules in the game work for the person they're used on or by. They can do anything from allowing your character to shoot fireballs instead of bullets out of their gun, or to allow them to grow sharp claws in place of their fists, or even cause the earth to open up beneath somebody and swallow them whole, spitting up nothing but bones and blood. As you guessed, powers in this game can get pretty bonkers, but as I mentioned, they come with a price. Every time you use a power, it increases a little thing referred to as your encroachment rate. Your encroachment rate is how far along the renegade virus has come in taking you over, and if at the end of the game session your encroachment rate is above 100, it's entirely possible your character will lose their mind and you will lose control of that character. Specifically, this means you would have to make a new character, and your old character is now an evil NPC that might come back to haunt you. It's possible to lower your character's encroachment rate at the end of a game, if you haven't already guessed that, and it requires something called loises. Loises are your character's connection to the world, and they could be communities that your character belongs to, somebody they're related to, or even just somebody they kind of vaguely remember down the street at the convenience store. Your character starts every session with around 4 of them. 3 are suggested by your character's personal data, and a 4th one is determined before the game starts. The 4th Lois is usually somebody important to the plot the GM has prepared for the game session, and it's given to one or more of the players. Or the 4th Lois could just be somebody else out at the table. And of course, you can gain new Loises as the game session goes on, up to a maximum of 8. The more Loises you have at the end of a game session, the more you can lower your encroachment rate at the end. Basically, at the end of a session, you roll 1d10 for every Lois you have and reduce your encroachment rate by that much. If you still didn't lower it beneath 100, you can roll again and lower by that much more for a penalty. But if after this you're still above 100, your character is no longer playable. If you do retain control over your character though, depending on how many times you had to roll as well as how high your encroachment rate was, you gain more or maybe less experience to improve your character. That's most of the rules for Double Cross in a nutshell. I'm not gonna lie, I actually left a lot out because this is a thick book. There is a lot to this. Granted, most of it is powers and character data and such, stuff that you don't really need to have memorized, but there's also a lot of other stuff that just can't be abstracted into one kind of role like you could with Tenra Bancho Zero or Ryutama. Honestly, this game actually kind of reminds me a lot of Dungeons & Dragons. There's a heavy emphasis on fighting, and there's a lot of rules that govern all that, and a couple of other rules that are a little miscellaneous, and they don't really merge well into one another. Honestly, if you're looking for a new game, and you're only familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, you'd likely feel right at home with Double Cross. I hope you enjoyed this video. I realize I skipped over a lot about this game, so here's the deal. If there was something you wanted me to go into more detail about or revisit, let me know in the comments. You can also use the comments to tell me how awful this video is. But if you think otherwise, the like button is just above the comment box. And with all that said, I am Schaedel, and I will see you all next time.